Okay, I wasn't recording. We convened at Geologic Safety Committee meeting, started at 10:03. Roll call and
Simon Van Burek, present.
Nan Shasta, present.
Bob Rucky, present.
Area is present. Steve Ingebrigtsen, present.
And Mary Husky, a town council liaison is present. Thank you. Okay, if there is anyone who has anything to say about an item not on the agenda, now's the time.
Okay, I just want to be very brief, but I just want to pass some information to everybody. A couple of weeks ago, my father fell and fractured one of his vertebrae. He was in the hospital at Stanford all last week. He's now at the V, which is across from the Stanford Shopping Center. And we hope that he comes home soon. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, okay, so he's already at the gate.
Yeah. Yeah, he slipped in the middle of the night and landed on his fanny, and his one vertebrae on his back didn't like it. They gave a procedure where they injected they used a needle to inject something into the vertebrae that's some kind of magic something or other. I'm sure a doctor will cringe at what I'm saying, but I'm going to call it super glue. But apparently it hardens within minutes, and it's supposed to help stabilize the vertebrae to speed the recovery process. And it takes about a week to find out how well that procedure will benefit him, and it has not yet been that week, but right now it seemed optimistic.
Okay, we certainly hope so. And as Stephen Gary said, we all wish him.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're never supposed to fall anymore. I did this.
Oh,
ouch. It gets the sympathy vote,
Oh.
but just barely.
Okay, we're on to old business. What I'm trying to do is finish the business portion of the meeting as quickly as we can. And then Tim Wisniewicz is supposed to be here at 11 to speak to this and record or talk for posterity. And if we have a few minutes in between, we'll take a break. Okay, subcommittee reports, evacuation, yeah, anything?
Yeah, I've started an outline and starting to write sections of the I don't know how to refer to it, a book, pamphlet, report that's supposed to accompany the evacuation map and specifically just talk about geologic hazards in each neighborhood.
Okay, because we have the comprehensive booklet for the sort of the overview, but the neighborhood maps, I think, is going to be very valuable. Thank you. Okay, hazards, anything on hazards? Anyone done anything on hazards?
We are going to talk about the safety element.
Okay. Well,
Are we?
that's coming, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I was awake, right?
Okay. Communications is Pat. Communications and outreach is Pat. She's not here, and safety element is next. So I have some things to say about it too. Just about process first. And that is basically on the email planning and building director. What is it? Right. Yes, I'm sorry, on page 2, the back of the agenda. Flip the page. Okay, for the safe draft, so the safety element came out in draft May 29th, and we have until June 30th to submit comments. So Gary, you're going to have the chance.
Well, mine
Okay.
started on page 11 of the element itself that we have in our hand.
Okay.
It is about the evacuation problem, and they show the roads, the two main roads for evacuation. They're both single lane roads on each way. The difficulty is with not so much earthquakes, but with wildfire. I- Everybody needs to be able to quickly evacuate. And we saw just last week at Corte Madera School, how things get tied up when people are there having an evening of children's drama, that is the plays and stuff like that. It's really closed down
You
with the
mean
cars. The cars just block everything up. And in a real emergency, the cars will be not trying to come and park, but merely to get the hell out of there. And that's going to be very difficult with a 2-lane road. You have to live with that for a long time. But the fact of the matter is, with increased numbers of houses in this area, there will be more regular use of the road. Right now, the roads are not heavily used, but in an emergency, it's going to be a terrible thing because you want a lot better roads, at least 2 lanes out.
Well, the
And-
fire district says
and
it's
in.
going to take one of the lanes. Yes, and that would leave us with 1 or 2 if we can manage to widen the road slightly. Yeah, we do need 2 lanes out. That's
We
the
really
point.
do need it, and it's sort of like Southern California, the Palisades file. You don't need incredible amount of water transportation in the system until you have a problem. And nobody plans for that because it costs tax dollars. And we can't afford it, but if you don't do that, you run the risk of people not having what they need.
Gary, are you mostly referring to Indian Crossing Road?
Hmm?
Are you mostly referring to Indian Crossing Road?
No,
Road
well,
that
that
comes straight up past the
in
school?
terms of the grade school problem, yeah, that was just a very local problem of cars coming and parking. But no, what I'm really concerned about is Alpine. We didn't have an emergency because the children were putting on plays and there was a lot of parents around. But when there's a wildfire, moving out of the area is of the essence. You have to do it fast. You know what I mean. You can't just wait around. So you need to have better egress. You also need better access, but presumably there is still 1 lane coming in and that'll be almost a fire truck. So somehow we need to at least mention to the town council that an effort has to be made to dual lane the roadway, the major escape roadways, because that's likely where, of course, things will get stuck. It happened at in Parasat, the Paradise Fire, I think. And I think it happened at least locally in Pacific Palisades.
Yes, it could happen.
Anyway, they don't talk much about that in this report regarding page 11, and then with the images, which those things are all good to have, but it really begs the question, what happens in the real emergency?
Okay, I have a couple of responses to that. One is, this is supposed to be a very high-level report that's not talking about the details. And from the perspective of the report, and it's a general plan, not a specific plan. For the general plan, this scenario you proposed from wildfire following earthquake and the traffic problem, with evacuation. That's a sort of detail that's handled in the page at the end. I'll wonder if I can put it on the screen. I'm looking at the safety plan. If we can, maybe I can just describe it. Oh, can you? Okay, if you have a laptop.
I also have the plan on my laptop,
Okay.
if you know the page
Go over-
number.
Share with Simon and
If you don't mind, or we could maybe put it up.
Uh,
so share your screen.
I'll need to join the Zoom, right?
Okay, in the meantime, we'll try to get that on the screen. In the meantime, in the interest of time, just let me describe the process. So we have, our committee may comment until June 30th. And it's a public review period. And then Wednesday, in 2 days, there will be a joint meeting of the town council and the planning commission at which the draft will be presented. And we are encouraged to be there with more than just one person, just to show solidarity and seriousness about this. This is basically a once or twice in a generation opportunity to do anything about the legal documents that are basically controlling the safety, all the elements of safety in the town. So, I do take it seriously, even though as Gary says, it doesn't have a lot of the detail that we are interested in.
Recording in progress.
Because you.
Recording in progress.
There's a section at the end, Simon, it's. I don't have it.
Forgive me, Gary,
Yeah.
I
don't
think
know.
you need both to turn off the microphone and to press the volume
No, not that
button on
one.
the top right.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. That's what I did last time.
You also want to, down here, you want to turn that off.
The audio, it is off.
No, you do it again, click it again.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Are we okay now? or-
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, assignment on page 55, I'm skipping. So, the safety element is divided into sections, and geological hazards are one section. And then you've got fire, and then you've got sustainability, which is the new one the state has listed that we put in. Actually, I guess that's been in here for a little while. They're very interested in climate, that's the climate change.
None, please could you give me the page number again?
Yes, 55.
I suspect that's the 55th page in the document as opposed to the page that is numbered 50.
Yes, it's page. Go to page 62.
There we go.
68 in the PDF.
62 is the last numbered page in the document.
I have 60 page.
But that's the page number I need.
Oh, you want that one? Okay. Oh, in the document, you want, okay. And then it's 55.
55 is the blank page, nearly blank.
Oh, then 56.
56. Okay, implementation action.
So the document is divided into the sections by safety concern. And within the sections, it has goals, which are very, very high level and almost sort of high in the sky. And and policies. Safety goals and policy. So within those, the third level of details called implementation actions. And that's where we live, basically. What are the projects we think need to be done to actually, boots on the ground to, make safe with her. And that's at the end of the document. Yeah, do you have it there? Simon has it, implementation actions. And especially in that section, but occasionally in the main part of the document, I hear Pat's voice and my voice. If we were the two people who commented on the 2022 draft 4 years ago. We started this. So a lot of our suggestions are here.
They are?
They are, and I have to go through what we suggested and compare with this and see basically what's missing and whether it's really still relevant, whether we want to make a point of it or whether it's not to mention. But the work our committee is doing, and we have projects, right, and they should fall under the heading of, one of these implementation actions. This document is supposed to govern what we do. And so far it has. I mean, we've stayed within the bounds of the document. We don't think we've strayed. But we haven't been aware of the overarching structure within which we're working. This is the ruling document. And it's supposed to be finished very, very soon. We don't want to spend any more money on consultants. We spent $200,000 for the 2022 draft in consultants and another 100,000 this time. And we don't have the budget town doesn't have the budget to redraft and redraft. So anything we do should have a minimal impact on the document itself. I think we might be able to add, if we need to, implementation actions. But if we have substantive comments on the document, we need to speak up. Okay. So the question is, how are we going to do this? Do we want to work as a committee of 5? You want a subcommittee? And everyone has some stake in this. And they need the collective advice of the committee.
Nan, have you read the entire 60-page document?
Yes.
Once. Okay, so I have only read through the high-level material that takes us down to, I'm sorry, about page 30, right?
Yeah.
So I've read the geologic safety material.
Right.
And I have some grammatical issues with the entire document. And I have a very trivial issues with the geologic safety section, but I have not yet read pages 30 through 60
For the other,
for the safety goals and policies. That's right.
Oh, okay. I suggest that everyone read it. Bill, you've read it all the way through? Have you? Gary, have you read the document all the way through? Or
Not in,
our section?
there are parts I've read more thoroughly than others.
Okay,
I've scanned the whole thing, but I have not read it.
okay,
But I'm looking for things that I was concerned about.
okay. Yeah, there are a whole bunch of problems with the maps in our section.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I understand that we are not requested or required to approve. What we are requested to comment, but we are not requested to approve.
That's right. And the powers that be would appreciate it if we didn't have any changes that involved more than minimal changes in the PDF, so they don't even have to renumber the pages, I think.
And I think if we were required to approve, that would not be possible while so many of the maps say updated maps will be provided prior to adoption.
Right. That's right, but we're not being asked to approve.
Right.
All you can do
Right.
is comment. You say, hey, note that, don't forget to update this. There's a place where they have the states liquefaction susceptibility and landslide now. And they footnote with the 2005 maps. And I looked them up and they were redone in 2024, just a year ago. So I have a comment about that, for instance.
In general, the footnotes are not fully referenced so as to be uniquely accessible, and the web links are too often incorrect and give a 404 error.
I noticed that too. Right. Okay, so we're going to have to submit written comments. And how are we going to do that? We can't have, if we have a quorum, we have to have an official Brown Act meeting.
If everyone here has read through at least the first 20 pages covering the geologic safety element, we could probably step through those page by page and accumulate our suggestions.
Not today, though. We
Okay.
won't have time.
Okay, okay,
I think we won't have time. We'll see. We have to get through a couple of other things,
okay.
but maybe we can start.
Mhm.
But do you want to have another meeting? Or do you want to, the other way of doing this is to have a subcommittee of 3 people and deputize the committee of 3 to speak for the entire committee and submit comments.
Mm.
So
I have a suggestion. I like the idea of a subcommittee because you can meet at your convenience and we don't have to have the burden of a full meeting with all the Brown Act things. But I hope that, and since it will be a subcommittee of not the whole committee, but I'm hoping that it's within that somebody like, well, myself, I could submit to the subcommittee my comments. And then the committee can then look at whatever comments I submit, and you can do whatever you want with my comments and then decide what you're going to give to the town.
Can we do that? Everyone could submit comments to the subcommittee, which would compile them and present them as one set of comments. No. I've got 3 minutes to talk on Wednesday. No. All I can say on Wednesday is I can make a general comment and then I'll say we will submit, we formed a subcommittee or whatever we decide to do, and we will submit comments. But the question is whether the other 2 people, if we have a subcommittee of 3, the other 2 people can submit comments to the subcommittee so the subcommittee can include their comments. Okay, thank you.
I think it should be possible because it's really one-way communication. Somebody outside the subcommittee is just giving the committee communication, and then the committee decides what they're going to do with it.
I'm sorry.
What would the specific task and the timeline for that subcommittee do?
The specific task is to compile all comments into well, how does Darcy want the comments? Does she want little comments marked on the draft copy on the PDF? Okay, but whatever her preferred form of submission is, will do. But the subcommittee would be responsible for compiling all comments into a single set of comments and submitting to the town before June 30th.
Before June,
30th.
perfect. Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. Thank you. This is good. Okay.
And I'll bring it up meeting this afternoon, and I'll present it to the back to this. If there's a problem with that.
Okay. Then he's going to be on the subcommittee. I can do it. I guess I know I've got most background. I'm going to be gone for the second half of the month, but I'll be available to Zoom. or email. So if I'm on the subcommittee, that shouldn't be a problem. Simon?
I serve at the chair's pleasure.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Who else wants to do it?
I'm happy to do it if you'd like, Nan, but it's up to you to.
Would you say?
Yeah, I'm in Oregon all next week, but I'd be prepared to Zoom from up there as well. And then I'm back here the last week of the month.
Okay, so, yeah, so we'll figure out timing, because we still have a lot of reading and comments of our own to do. So everyone's homework, okay, so, may I have a motion to form a subcommittee to compile documents from all committee members to submit to the town before June 30th.
I move that we form a subcommittee to provide consolidated responses and suggestions to the draft safety element committee. There's a draft safety element report to the town by June the 30th.
Thank you, Simon. Do I have a second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we will form a subcommittee and as of now, it looks as if the subcommittee members are Simon and Steve and Nan. I think Bob will also be responsible for reading the document and submitting comments. If this is
I
it.
forget what Pat's schedule is. Is she out of town? for-
She's still out of, she's
extended
still
period?
traveling, I think, yeah. And, yeah. So I will shoot her an email and tell her, read and comment if she can.
Right, because it sounds like you and she were the main commenters on
The only
2022
commenters, yeah,
22 version.
exactly. Yeah.
Just for clarity for myself, since we're on this topic, I know we need to move on, but it sounds like you want each of us to read the entire document. We will come up with comments, but the final product that this draft that we're looking at is still a high-level document that does not get in the weeds of details. Is that correct?
Well, the weeds, well, I mean, if you say, okay, this sentence doesn't make sense because the comma is misplaced or something, you can comment on the grammar.
Okay.
But Darcy doesn't want to have to rewrite pages of the PDF unless it's really important.
Okay.
Okay, so that means it will just, there are probably there are probably going to be better ways of saying things, writing things, and maybe some of the things we think are important haven't been emphasized quite enough. And I'm thinking cascading hazards, and I'm thinking of fire following earthquake. So look particularly for those throughout the document and see what you can find. Okay. Okay. So I don't want to go through the whole document right now, but let's see, Simon. Let's come back to this if we have time before 11. I've got another couple of things I have to get to. Okay. Resilience in Japan, Steve, anything?
I'm sorry, nothing much to report. I'm still looking at the Japan Times every day, and that reminds me that Pat and I have this job to do, but nothing specific to report. And, of course, we had some useful insights from Ross Stein when he visited.
Yeah, I thought so too. So if you can capture those too, and you report that to Fred.
Yeah.
External coordination.
Nothing to report.
Okay, that's fine. Other reports. Okay, I just wanted to say the town council met last Wednesday to decide on finalized budget for the coming fiscal year. And the budget we submitted is six. So what happened was, the map updates for Cotton Shire's 9 parcels that have changes to the geologic and or ground movement potential map are going to be done between Cotton Shires and the town. Okay? And that's fine. They've already been approved years ago by the planning commission. So, okay. But they're going to get done. Those map updates are going to get done. Town is budgeting for it. Yeah, they've been approved by the planning commission.
So let me see if I get this right. The actual changes have already been
No.
decided?
Yeah.
They were decided by the planning commission and Cotton Shires?
They've been charged in, yes. Okay, so the list of the 9 deviating from the budget discussion. Let me come back to that. Budget. So they're going to do that. So on page 6 was our proposed budget. That takes off the 7,500 for map updates. That's gone from our budget. And they took off another 1,000. Anyway, they left us $600. So we actually do have $600 to spend, which is nice. Yeah. That is that. Okay, let's go back to the changes, which are at the top of page 4. Those are the parcel numbers, and we can look them up. We could look up the planning commission meetings and get the, because they're in the agenda for the planning commission, the agenda package for the meeting. Or we could request the town to send us a geologic report. It shouldn't be very hard to find them if they want to read them. So yes, Bob, the changes have been
It's done.
decided by the planning commission. Yeah, so it's not within the purview of our committee, not only to question the changes for specific development projects. Yes, that is correct. We don't comment on specific development projects. And these are specific building projects or specific parcels. Might just be building a new house or something like that, but that is considered a development project.
Okay.
They did, Darcy made a point of saying that they did not allow budget for, and you can see it here, for the investigation of, we might be, and she mentioned specifically Black Mountain and Barracuda Falls. So if we want to get budget to continue that, if we need budget for that, then we would have to apply probably the next one. And as for the scanning of the old reports in Cotton Sheriff's office, maybe the town archive, the planning department says it'll take care of that. So I think we should revisit that in a year and make sure it's been done, and if not, then bring it up again. I'm not going to push it this year because it's no money.
Okay.
Okay.
So in Darcy's email to you, Nan, she says she's added new information to the town webpage. And that new information appears to be exactly the text that is then listed beneath, starting with this title, map amendments.
Starting with
you have a subhead, she had a subheading map amendments, and that from that point on, that is the text on the website.
Oh, it's already there?
It's already there. So she lists these parcel numbers. I can recognize that those landowners may recognize their planning commission resolution number, but it does remain entirely opaque. What are the changes that were made to the map?
That's correct, but one has to look up the parcel numbers, get the geotechnical reports and read them. So I've read some of them, over the years. Some of these I know. Most of them I don't.
And so please, could you give us a sense of the sorts of map modifications that are made
Yes.
as a response to the individual geotechnical report?
Okay, it's mainly modifications that are made as a result of trenching or borehole studies for a building project on a specific parcel. You want to build a house in a new place, and on your lot, you've got to show that the soil is stable,
Right.
basically, stable enough.
So I could imagine that a trench shows that on one property, a fault does exist or a fault does not exist.
Okay, we're looking for faults and we're looking for unstable soil
Right.
type. Okay.
But what intrigues me is if, for example, a trench were to show evidence of a fault, how would the new revised town map propagate that evidence into adjacent
Okay,
properties?
I'll give you.
And similarly, if it removed a fault.
Okay, I'll give you the one example from this list, and that is on Ramoso Road. There was a lot. There was people who wanted to rebuild their house or tear down their house and build a new one, and on the geologic map there is a fault running at the part of the parcel is level, but then it slopes down to a gully, the drainage, and since very early days, there's been a fault mapped through the drainage, and it's supposed to be an old fault, not an active one. Okay. So when they trenched for the house, they trenched across the driveway, and they found the fault. It was 2 old units. I forget exactly which they were, but they were not. They would place the fault in the out of the Alquist Creola. It was not Holocene. It was much older. Okay, and that was clear from the trenching report. Okay, so what John Wallace did was to say, okay, well, the fault isn't at the bottom of the drainage. It runs through this this lot, and we know the angle of the fault. Okay, so what you have to do, it's state law, I think, and maybe just general practices. If you have an old fault that's not likely to move, of course, it could always be triggered, but not likely to move. You don't want to put your house on top of it because you've got 2 different soil types formed on 2 different types of rock. Okay, and the shrinking swelling would be, it might create differential movement under the house. So what you have to do is stay not 50 feet or 100 feet back from the fault, but 5 feet back from the fault. And that's just so that you don't.
Is that a legal requirement?
Yeah, I have seen it in other places.
And
It's either legal or common practice, and I'm not sure. I think it's at least common practice.
in all local jurisdictions or just in this jurisdiction?
No, it's not just this jurisdiction. I've seen it for others.
So
I'm not aware of any, what's the right word, requirement, regulation, there's probably a better word, in our town list of things that specify that specify what you're asking. I think I'm of the impression that it's more of a common practice.
So, for example, Woodside has just approved a new building literally on the Pilocitos fault,
Oh, no. On?
on the Pilocitos fault,
Not a good idea.
Be- because it is not an Alquist-Priolo fault.
Yes.
Jeez.
They have permitted a house that will be built on the Pilocitos
And how
fault,
did they know the fault is it? Did they?
as defined by geotechnical surveys on that property.
Oh, my God. They didn't require any setback whatsoever.
They required no setback whatsoever.
Okay. That's very interesting.
I find it very interesting also. You have probably, those of you who read the almanac, will have seen numerous stories about the couple's efforts to build and develop this property with ADUs and structures on the fault.
And that wasn't a consideration? I mean,
The town council simply said that they accepted the planning manager's report.
was it Cotton Shores report?
No, the planning manager chose not to take the advice of Cotton Shires.
Sorry, I'm stunned.
I think many in the audience were stunned as well. The town council did not give their rationale for these decisions, for accepting the appeal by the applicants.
I've never heard of overriding the geologist's report.
In this town, perhaps we're fortunate to have town leadership that respects expert opinion.
Yes, I think we are. Thank you. I guess that's what can happen if geological hazards are ignored. That, okay. I didn't realize there was a. Pardon? Oh.
You're very soft-spoken, Nan, even into the microphone.
Okay. Can you hear me? No? Can? No, I was just saying that I was extremely surprised that the oh, that's
I think Nan expressed her agreement that this town is fortunate to have town governance that respects expert opinion in these matters.
yeah, absolutely. Yes.
I
Okay.
think I saw you quoted in the Country Almanac in that story, perhaps, Simon, were you? Yeah.
I
Hey,
was.
could you remind me, why is the Pilocitos fault not included under Alquist Riolo?
It's old.
Just not sufficiently recent movement?
That's right.
There is no accepted evidence of sufficiently recent movement on the Pilocitos fault. Some reports say there are rare micro earthquakes. It is my belief that the routine breaks of the water lines that cross the trace of the fault imply slip, creep at the surface. But in this particular example, the applicant's rebuttal of my testimony stated that because it was not an Alquist-Priolo fault, there could not be any creep on it. Because, of course, California law takes precedence over scientific geology.
Thank you.
Perhaps our speaker will be able to comment on ways to address neotectonic movements and how Alquist-Priolo should or might be adapted to geologic investigation. I've been digressing because this does not concern Portola Valley.
No, but
It only
it,
concerns how we hope, how the maps are then revised and what is the implication of the maps, whether it is in this case, a legal implication they could not build across the fault, or simply that they accepted a town recommendation, they did not build across the fault.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
What we should do is check with John Wallace to see whether it's simply common practice, accepted as good practice, or is there some legal underpinning? Let's see. Okay, I'm going to have to leave our discussion. We could go on for hours talking about the safety elements in the Pillar Citas fault and building across or close to faults. Okay, so that was one example you asked, and I'll just give one
Right,
more.
right.
And the other was up here on Grove, and there was a section of sort of a curved section of PD soil out on the
Dan, can you,
which means potentially
you know,
potentially PD, potentially unstable. Anyway, it's potentially unstable, and you're not supposed to build on it unless you can prove that it is in fact stable. So they dropped some boreholes into the cores, and they said, no, it's not PD. I'm not convinced because of the topography. I think it might be, but okay. So it was determined not to be unstable, so they were allowed to build. Yeah, it's that sort of thing. It's mainly soil designation changes on the ground movement potential map, but that one fault movement, I think we could probably revisit after we've considered it ourselves, because it's a major thing to change a fault on a
Yes,
map. It's
Absolutely.
a line on a map that's been there for 60 years, 50 years. Yeah. Okay, we need to move onward. Kim is here. Thank you very much. And she needs a few minutes to set up, but let's.
Hi,
quickly-
I'm sorry, I'm driving. Are you taking any public comment?
Oh, okay, Rita, yes, okay, public comment. Hi.
I just have an odd question based on what's being discussed here. So if it's found out with a neighbor building, making, inquiries about the property that they're building on, who lets the other neighbors know the findings if it's something about a fault? Do we just wait until eventually the town updates a map to find out ourselves? How do we find this out?
I
Thank you.
think that is correct, Rita. I think it is
Ah.
incumbent upon each property owner to routinely visit the town records and find out if there have been any changes.
Yes, in the case
That's
of this fault
unfortunate.
on Mimosa that was moved, the town geologist suggested in his report that it probably also runs through the adjoining parcel. And they should be very careful to check before they build. It would run through where the old house had been. There's no house on the second parcel yet. So yeah, so it's up to we get a geological hazards report when we buy a property, but for something like that, if there's something so subtle, it may escape the standard report. And I think that the property owner really needs to dig as much as possible before buying. Rita, anything else? That's a good question. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Of course, I'm quite upset about the Philippines, the 7.8 that happened today in the Philippines. And I have friends that are just traveling now that their kids are out of school and they just landed yesterday and I haven't heard back from them. But you know, it's just a good reminder of what this could mean for us. You know, you never know when it's going to happen, but if it's happening to them, it could happen to us.
Certainly could. They were fortunate it was in the ocean, a ways off the coast, although the southern coast of the southernmost island was pretty severely impacted. Okay, and Japan was bracing for tsunami too. Okay, we need to approve the minutes from the last meeting very quickly.
So moved.
Page 5. Let's see.
There's a small correction.
I have one too, okay.
The date says Monday, May 15th. It was a Friday.
Oh, you're right. Thank you. The other thing is, I had picked when I was. Oh, where is it? Oh, yeah. On page 6 at the end, adjournment, it says 11:13, typo 12:13. The committee voted to adjourn the meeting. That should be 11, should be okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Right, we met on Friday. Okay. Any other comments, Doctor? Questions? Okay, Bob, very much. There was careful note taking and reading the minutes. You did a good job.
Thank you. Well, I did part of it. So I make a motion that we approve the minutes with the changes that we've talked about.
Do you have a second?
Yeah,
Second.
Well, okay, all in favor? Opposed? Okay.
Aye.
Minutes,
Sweet.
minutes are approved. Okay, so,
Quorum check.
farm check, okay, really quickly. Who's going to be here for the second Monday in July, which is second Monday in July is the 13th.
Oh, I will.
Simon?
I would prefer not to be, but I could potentially join by Zoom if the town council has approved that modification to the Brown Act rules. Hope to do so. Okay, not yet, no. Okay.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, Steve, you here?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I'm here. I've
Okay, so
got a note here that something to do with the San Andreas Fault. Was there,
No. Originally, Kim was going to talk in July.
that's it.
That's why I had that written down as,
Or she's gonna come back again.
no,
if we're lucky.
No,
All right. I'll
first had her
take
down
off
for
the San
July.
Andreas Fault.
My fault. Okay, what about August 10th? And May probably will be here.
That's a little farthest into the future, but probably yes, I will be here.
Okay, anyone else planning to be out?
August?
Monday, the 10th, yes?
Not yet.
Not yet. Sorry.
No, Monday, the 10th of August.
Mhm.
That's the next meeting, second meeting.
Second meeting, yeah.
So it is the thing.
I'm just doing a quick check on that.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, I've got it written down already.
Oh, wonderful, thank you.
Well, you must have said something.
Probably. Last meeting, Simon, you here?
I will be in town, whether it's the first day of middle college, and I don't yet know
Mm,
my movements.
Okay, well, tentatively, but let's
Tentatively,
plan
yes.
for the July meeting. Okay. All right. Tim, you're next, and it is my great pleasure to introduce to those of you who haven't met her, Tim Wismuth. Simon knows him.
So
Let's-
Kim,
let's bring you
where
up.
would you like to stand and present or sit and present? The podium may be most convenient for you, or as you wish.
Yes.
There is, but.
Go wherever.
And so wherever in this room you want. I'll have to email you Zoom, or I can try and invite you. There is a council chambers Wi-Fi, if anybody knows the password for that.
Capital BIL, capital LAND, 1919.
I'll put this up on the wall.
19 down to the birth year.
Capital B, capital L.
I don't have, what's your email, Kim? Oh, Kimber, Ley, yes.
Oh,
Kimberly? Keep going. Okay, that I can spell. Yeah. sjsu.edu. I hope you have an email that has just invited you to the correct Zoom meeting. Oh, okay. And Kimberly, I'm delighted to tell you there are 10 people online, as well as people in this room.
Challenges are if any of the schools in session.
Okay.
So 20 minutes.
Recording in progress. Okay. So. This is what the consumer. Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah, of course, I'm yours. Okay, so I'll just get started.
Yeah, before Kim starts, we are very pleased to welcome Kimberly Blizniuk, who is full professor at San Jose State University. And specialty is neotectonics. She's in the geology department, and they are very, very lucky to have her. Are you the only geophysics person in the department right now?
Yeah, Betsy Madden just joined our department a couple of years ago and she
Okay,
does fault mechanics. So we're really happy to have her.
okay, great. Yeah. All right, so yeah. Right, so Kim is an expert on the San Andreas Fault. She's literally in the trenches. She's dug across the San Andreas near here, just south of here in Sanborn County Park, and has some very interesting results that are very relevant for us here. And she's also worked in Southern California, in the San Andreas. And I understand that you worked across multiple strands of the San Andreas and were able to determine the slip rates for the multiple strands and figure out which one had the highest slip rate and therefore was most dangerous,
Yes.
which is very important. Okay, with that, I will let Kim speak.
Okay, so thanks for having me. Today, I'm just going to summarize some of the work I do as an earthquake geologist, and I'm going to take you to a journey to the faults and earthquakes of the San Francisco Bay Area and some of the new work that we've been doing across the region. And so all of this work is funded by the National Science Foundation and NEHRP and SCEC. And a lot of this work is available through virtual field trips through Google Earth, which I'll also show you. And so just to be clear, I wanted just to make sure we're all on the same page and that the study of earthquake geology is basically the study of assessing the potential of an earthquake on active faults. And so when we go out into the field, we're studying the potential of earthquakes, future earthquakes on active faults. And the way we do that is through many different factors. You can do that with geologic data, which measures strain rate across the region, or geodetic data, which measures strain rate across the region. You can do that with seismologic data, which measures like small earthquakes along a fault, historic data, past known earthquakes. And what I'm going to talk about is geologic data, how the geology of the landscape preserves these past earthquakes. And so this is a picture of the San Andreas Fault. And you guys should all recognize Highway 280 along that fault. And the red line shows you the San Andreas Fault cutting across the region. On the west side there, you'll see the Santa Cruz Mountains, and the lake is San Andreas Lake, and on the east side is the North American Plate. Okay, so the San Andreas, the main plate boundary, runs right through this region along Highway 280 down here towards Portola Valley and into Saratoga and Sanborn County Park and so on. And so what we do is, my students and I, we go out into the field. We look for something called surface faults so that we can map it. We bring samples, sediment and rock samples back into the lab, and we process these samples in the geochronology lab so that we can obtain the dates of the landforms. And so if we have dates of landforms that are offset, we can get something called slip rates. We apply structure from motion, sedimentology, and LiDAR. So we combine many different techniques to study active faults. And so these are just pictures of all the students and colleagues that have been working on the San Andreas Fault or strands of the San Andreas Fault. And so I summarized what earthquake geology is. And so with geologic data, we're going to look at the stratigraphic, geomorphic, and structural evidence of past earthquakes. And to do that, we do something called paleoseismology and neotectonics. And so to understand what I and my colleagues and students do in the field, this is just a photo of me in the field. And basically, geomorphic data looks at fault displacement in past multiple events to try to get a displacement per event. And to quantify the slip rate on a fault, we need something called the rate and the timing of past earthquakes. So I'm standing on what we call the San Jacinto Fault in Southern California. I'm actually pointing at the offset landform that has been displaced along the fault. And so that is me standing on the fault and the landform that is displaced. And what is displaced here is a debris flow bar that is moved along the fault. And you can see the bar that is moved along the fault through surface displacement. And one of the reasons why surface displacement along faults is so important is because the earthquakes we care about are big earthquakes. We're not too worried about, magnitude 5s or 4s because they don't disrupt the surface. They're not going to damage infrastructure. We're worried about earthquakes that rupture through the surface. And so this is evidence of an earthquake rupturing through the surface, displacing this landform that ran across the fault before it was displaced through multiple earthquakes. And so this relies on what we call detailed mapping. We have to locate the fault, the geometry, and the geomorphic feature that can produce strong ground motion. And that's the difference between smaller earthquakes that produce submotion that we feel and earthquakes that are big and that cause a lot of strong ground motion that displaces the surface. So here you can see multiple strands along an alluvial fan that has displaced the surface through strong ground motion. And a lot of this was from the Borrego Springs earthquake back in 1980s, in the 1980s. And so basically hazard scales directly with slip rate. And so on the y-axis here is slip rate and on the x-axis is time. And so when we look at all of these different data sets, I'm going to argue that the most informative data set to study any active fault is what we call the geomorphic data set, because unlike geologic data, which is bedrock displacement, and geodetic data, which is just strain accumulation over the last few decades, paleoseismic and geomorphic data covers the occurrence of previous earthquakes over multiple earthquake cycles over a much longer time period so that we can really understand how the fault is behaving and how fast or slow the fault may be moving. And so to do that, we look at these geomorphic markers. This is an offset landform along the San Andreas at a site at Wallace Creek in the Carrizo Plain. And you can see that that stream used to cut across the fault and now it's been offset. And we look at these structures to really quantify slip rates on active faults. And so, and this is really important because on the map to the left of the screen, you'll see all of the active faults in the San Francisco Bay Area. There's also the location of two more recent earthquakes on the San Andreas Fault, both of which went through this region. And so that's the 1906 earthquake and the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. And so the geometry of these faults is, and slip rate is very important because the fault geometry and slip rates are the first order inputs for any earthquake probability model. So whatever the slip rate is, or whatever the geometry is for these active faults, this governs the hazard on a fault. So you can have a mapped hazardous fault, but it may not pose any significant hazard if the slip rate is low. So the slip rate on a fault is the defining factor of how hazardous a fault is, because that goes into these probability models. And so you can actually see on the right-hand screen the probability of all the different earthquakes in the next, 30 years or so. And that probability on those individual earthquakes stem from what the slip rate is on any of these individual faults. And so it's important then to know where all these faults are located. And we actually still do not know where many of these faults are located across California. And this is exemplified by the Ridgecrest earthquake sequence in Southern California, which generated two large surface rupturing earthquakes, 6.4 and a 7.1 earthquakes. And before the surface rupture, before the earthquakes, only 30% of the surface rupture was mapped. So we didn't even know those earthquakes existed. But after the earthquake occurred, geologists from the California Geological Survey and the USGS went out there and they realized there was actually abundant evidence for surface rupturing earthquakes. And so it's really important for us to really walk and map these faults as much as we can, especially if we're going to, in an area like this, if we're going to build on it. And we don't know where all of the faults are. And so now what I'm showing you are slip rates on the San Andreas fault that cuts through Portola Valley. And you'll see the slip rates in the red circle. And what we see are what we know today about how fast the San Andreas fault is moving. To the north, we have a slip rate of about 24 millimeters a year. And the slip rate is supposed to, models show that the slip rates decrease as we move to the south along the southern San Andreas in the peninsula. And then there's a question mark where we do not know the slip rate to the south in the Santa Mountains. And so what I'm going to show you today affects what we know about the slip rate here in Portola Valley, because I was able to constrain slip rates to the south, which is directly affected to what we know about this area. And so what I'm going to summarize today are what we call Holocene slip rates of the most recent time period of a fault in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And what it reveals is evidence of temporal and spatial consistency along the northern San Andreas, and the slip rates are actually quite higher. We're going to show you evidence of slip rates that are about 25 millimeters a year on the southern on the Santa Cruz section of the San Andreas fault, and these slip rates are very similar to what we get on what we call the North Coast section. And so in Northern California, the map that I'm showing you here shows slip rates on the San Andreas fault in Northern California. And the slip rates, as we see, decreases as we move towards the peninsula section. And in yellow are what we call geodetic slip rates. They're based on measured strain accumulation. And in blue are geologic slip rates. Those are based on geologic data in the field. And that is millimeters per year. And so, and now I'm going to just go through the slip rate site at the Santa Cruz Mountain site. And so the site that I'm going to summarize is at Sanborn County Park in Saratoga. And I'm just going to show you evidence of what we found there. And so on the left of the screen, we just have a LiDAR map of the area with the San Andreas fault running through it. And what you'll see are multiple streams that have been incised into a series of alluvial fans at Sanborn County Park. And we can actually use the ages of the alluvial fans and the displacement of the fans and the streams to constrain the slip rate in this area. And what's nice about this area is that the alluvial fans composed of these tertiary sandstones that are only found upstream on the other side of the fault. And we date them, and they're located on and displaced along the other side of the fault, so we can use those as markers for displacements. And next to the fault, the bedrock right next to the fault are just mudstones, and these mudstones are very different from the sandstones that are displaced across the fault on the alluvial fans. And I'll show you some more pictures so you can see what I'm talking about. And so these are the huge sandstone boulders that come from way upstream, and they only can be deposited across the fault through large climatic events that are that drives debris flow and alluvial fan. And so you can see these sandstone boulders. And what we can do is we can date these sandstone boulders to figure out when that depositional event occurred. And on the right there, you can see 3 different boulders. And what's interesting about these boulders is that they're imbricated, which means they have not moved since they were deposited, because that imbrication reflects a depositional landform and evidence of these boulders not moving. And so what we can do is we can date these boulders, and we can get a sense of when they were deposited. And the way we do that is something called beryllium-10 exposure dating. And beryllium-10 exposure dating basically measures the production of beryllium-10 in the rock at the surface. And I'm not going to go through the details of this, but basically in silica and oxygen, these high particles from outer space bombard the surface of Earth, and these high energy particles hit the atoms of the silica and oxygen within the quartz. And and alpha particles are ejected, and this spallation reaction occurs. And when these alpha particles are ejected, we form a new isotope within the rock. And this new isotope only forms when these rocks are at the surface of Earth. And so that new isotope is beryllium-10. So you can imagine an alluvial fan comprising of all these rocks are deposited, and it forms, and once it forms, the amount of beryllium-10 is very low. But as it's sitting on the surface of Earth and it's accumulating more and more cosmogenic radionuclide bombardment, we now can go back onto that landform once it's accumulated a lot of beryllium-10, and that landform is displaced along a fault. We can date that alluvial fan. And so that's what we did. And we didn't date just one alluvial fan. We dated 3 to 4 different alluvial fans and debris flows. And we found evidence of offset streams that are 320 meters, as large as 320 meters, and offset streams that are 170 meters plus or minus 20, and a younger debris flow deposit that's offset only by 50 meters or so. And when we combine the offsets with the age of these debris flows and alluvial fans, we end up getting much higher slip rates. And so the ages based on this technique that I just summarized tells us that these alluvial fans were deposited about 20,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, 8,000 years ago, and 2,500 years ago. And we can combine the age constraint with what we reconstruct as a maximum and minimum displacement along the fault. And so this is the reconstruction of the 12,000-year-old fan that has to be offset at least 300 meters, and that 300 meters simply realigns the incision of the fan back to a potential source. And the maximum offset realigns the fan back to the fan edge across the fault. So for each displacement, we have a maximum minimum. The minimum is the channel that has incised into the fan, because the incision of that channel must have occurred after the fan was deposited. And then the maximum offset is realigning the edge of the fan surface across the fault. And this is just summarizing the minimum and maximum offset of the 7,000-year-old surface. And you can actually see the minimum offset aligns the small channel that has incised into the alluvial fan, and the maximum offset realigns the edge of that alluvial fan that we have mapped. And then finally, for the 2,500-year-old surface, we have this debris flow that is offset along the fault, and the minimum offset is realigning the incised channel across the debris flow after it's been deposited, and then the maximum just aligns the debris flow across the fault. And I take on a lot of high school students and interns in my lab, and not all of them want to be geologists. Some of them are artists. And so this is a high school intern from Los Altos High, and she's now graduated. She just graduated from the University of Washington. But I took her out into the field and had her think about how the landscape may have deposited these landforms, and then how the fault would have displaced it. So this is her kind of animation of this area. And she did this in something called Adobe Animate. I'm a beta tester for a lot of the products that Adobe makes. And so she made this showing the deposits being deposited across the fault. And then this is showing the fault constantly moving, but you can imagine how we get these landforms. You deposit these landforms across the fault, you get earthquakes, and more and younger landforms are deposited across the fault, and eventually they get to where they are today. So the older landforms are offset much larger, and the younger landforms are offset less. Okay. And so we take all of this data from all of the ages and the offsets, and we can reconstruct what this landscape at Sanborn County Park looks like over time. And so you can imagine about 20,000 years ago, the oldest alluvial fans were deposited, and we call these alluvial fans Q2 deposits. And they were deposited across the fault, and after they were deposited, you start to incise channels into that alluvial fan. We also know that based on our ages, that this older alluvial fan was deposited and offset, and then at about 12,000 years ago, another younger alluvial fan was deposited across the fault. And these alluvial fans were then incised into. And then we know they were offset along the fault. And then finally, at around 7,500 years ago, another set of alluvial fans across all of these drainages were deposited across the fault and then offset. And so this is just a cartoon kind of summarizing how this landscape may have evolved through time. And then this is basically the final mapped version of what we see today. And so when we take all of those interpretations and that data together, we get a slip rate for the Santa Cruz Mountain section of the San Andreas Fault. And that slip rate tells us that this section of the fault is slipping at about 25 millimeters a year, plus or minus 3 millimeters. And the section of the fault is much faster than previously estimated. It's about 9 millimeters a year faster. This is actually consistent with the data that we have along what we call the North Coast section of the San Andreas Fault, which actually has slip rates over multiple time periods as well. And the slip rate is consistent for the Holocene period of the North Coast section. And so this kind of bears some doubt about this lower rate in the peninsula section of the San Andreas Fault, because this lower rate is extrapolated from what we call a paleoseismic site that only has 2 events. And so the idea is that we really need to reconsider how fast the fault may be slipping along the peninsula section. And it may not be as low as 15 millimeters a year or 17 millimeters a year, but it may be as high as 25 millimeters a year. And so this higher slip rate, when we take it together with the northern San Andreas Fault, suggests that, well, maybe the peninsula section of the San Andreas Fault is slipping at a much higher rate than we have previously thought. And that would make a lot of sense, because what we know about mature faults around the world is that they tend to maintain high slip across the fault. They're not like the faults to the east of here, like the Eastern California shear zone, where we have immature faults that are still evolving. Like the San Andreas Fault is mature, and when it slips or when there's an earthquake, you get stick slip and strong events, and wouldn't assume that it would be increasing in slip for whatever reason. So those are the conclusions here. I was going to also, and so I'm also, I work with Google and AGU for their centennial earthquake. So this site at Sanborn is available through Google Earth, and you can go in and you have me with little videos and a little tutorial that takes you to all of these landforms. And I hope you understand what we do to calculate slip rates across this fault. And so these are all accessible, and the link is, you just type in streetcar to subduction, and you just have to make sure you have Google Earth on your phone or computer. And you can actually see the fault from your screen, but you can also take the field trip and go into the field with me virtually to explore the San Andreas Fault at Sanborn County Park. And I can show you how to do that. It's pretty straightforward. And I was going to go through some of the work that we're also doing just on the other side of the Santa Cruz Mountains real quickly, where we've also identified active faults that have not been previously identified. And this is at Pillar Point Bluff along the San Gregorio Fault. And the San Gregorio Fault is really special because, unlike the San Andreas that cuts through most of California on land, the San Gregorio Fault is underwater along most of its length. And so it only comes on land at 3 different locations. One is in Big Sur. The other one is at Año Nuevo, just south of here near Santa Cruz, and at Pillar Point Bluff. And so I'm going to zoom into this red box that is Pillar Point Bluff. And if you guys have been to Pillar Point Bluff or heard of Mavericks, the reason why we have these high waves at Mavericks is because of the San Gregorio Fault. It's the location of that fault and where it has uplifted the rocks in the area, what we call the Prisma Formation, causes the waves to break out and move along to the shoreline to get these high waves. And so Mavericks is about right here, and Pillar Point Bluff is right here. And this is the Marine Terrace at Pillar Point Bluff. If you're familiar with Seal Cove is right here. And there's this huge landslide headscarp in this area shown by this crescent-shaped exposure. And I'm going to show you some evidence of what we've been working on with my colleagues and students. And so there is the strand of the bluff that forms this huge scarp along the airport here. And what I'm going to show you evidence is of unmapped fault that we think is quite active, that cuts right across the fault, right across the bluff, and connects up with the Seal Cove fault within the Seal Cove community. And so this is the exposure of the fault. These just show all of the different samples we collected across the fault to date the marine terrace and understand how many earthquakes or how active it may have been in the region. And so you can see we did a really good job dating this marine terrace. You can actually see fault gouge. So this is one of the few faults that you can see displacing both bedrock and the sediments overlying the bedrock. And this is just showing some of the mapped fault strands that cut straight up through the surface along this, what was previously unmapped in this region. And it kind of highlights the importance of going in and mapping or trying to identify all these active faults across the different areas, even where we have identified faults close by. And so this is just Hudson. He's one of the volunteers in my group that really have worked his heart and soul mapping this fault. And it's great because he's retired and he spends a lot of his time outside helping us with this. And so you can see how big this exposure is. This is your ultimate paleoseismic trench, and you can see the detailed mapping that we've done and how this is another strand of the fault that cuts through the bluff. And so we've identified at least 3 different strands of the fault that cuts through the bluff through here. And you can see the Parisma formation that's been uplifted. So that Parisma formation is what we call bedrock, and that is the marine cut platform. And the platform is offset and it has moved up about 10 meters and it's sitting right next to marine terrace formation. So sediments, and so it's hard rock next to sediment. And so what's really nice is that we can date all of these sediments, and what we get is a series of ages that get younger to the surface. And so that gives us evidence that there's likely Holocene activity along this fault, because the sediments, the young sediments date to about 11,000 years, and there's a scarp on the surface. So for the San Gregorio fault, what we see is that we also, I don't know if you can see these photos here, but there's a lot of fracture across the fault and movement along the bluff. And we've mapped in these new fault strands and also new fractures across the fault. And so what this review tells us is that this fault forms this positive flower structure along a left step or bend that connects the San Gregorio fault to the Seal Cove fault. And we have abundant ages to show that the fault is offsetting young sediment and is most likely Holocene and active. And we also think the fault may be creeping. And so this fault has not had earthquakes on it or historical earthquakes that we know of. But this is, these are the painted lines across the road. You can see there's a bunch of fracture across the entire road, which is evidence of, often evidence of creep or trees, roots. But you can actually see that the left side of the road and the right side of the road, though that white line has kind of deflected a little bit to the right. And so that suggests that, well, maybe the fault may not have continuous earthquakes on it, but it's continually moving aseismically without earthquakes. And so this ties into how we may get landsliding in the area. And so this is not just important here, but it's important to all areas where we have active faults, where we have creeping faults or seismic faults. And so that's just kind of work that I've been doing up in Pillar Point Bluff. And I was going to talk about some work I've been doing also to the north in Rogers Creek, but I think it's kind of north of here. But we also have new slip rates there. But to have time for some questions, I'm just going to go back to this. I want to go back to this slide, and this map that I showed you earlier on gave us a sense of what we knew about the fault systems and their slip rate. And by walking the faults, my students, colleagues, and I have been able to build on what we know. And what we know now is that, well, we may have unidentified active strands of the San Gregorio fault, and that fault may be creeping and really influencing the landsliding in the area. And we also know that the Rogers Creek fault may not be as fast as it has been previously thought, and the slip rates is slightly lower, which allows us to add more slip on the San Andreas proper. And then we also know that the slip rate of the Santa Cruz Mountain section of the San Andreas fault is slipping much faster than previously thought. And then that slip rate may likely be faster along the peninsula section of the San Andreas fault, which is here. And that's it. So if you have questions, I'll happily answer questions.
Could we start by asking members of the online audience if they want to ask questions? And they can always enter their requests into chat and have them relayed here, or we can have you unmute yourself. Raise a hand if you'd like to ask a question from the audience. Please.
In the north, Brisbane's going to put in a data center in a quarry, and I was wondering if you've studied that quarry and what you might predict in that area. So it's
yeah, I'm not familiar with,
okay.
with that.
All right. And then for Portola Valley itself, what would you suggest that we do to, if the fault goes through Portola Road, which you probably drove to get here, what would you recommend that our public works prepares for? Yeah.
Well, I have to say, I'm so impressed by Portola Valley that you have a Geologic Safety Commission. Like, this is amazing because most communities do not. And I think the fact that you have this safety commission is a great first step in really mitigating the potential hazards in an area. And I don't with this committee, I think you guys are doing it all right. Oftentimes there's many landowners or homeowners who want to build across faults, and there's no commission. Like, everything is assessed through a consultant, right? And then that consultant may or not be like the best person to evaluate how active a fault may be. And so the fact that you have the safety commission here, I think you guys are in good hands. Good hands.
What is it? 100 feet from a fault we can build? Can you clarify that for the public?
Yeah, the Alquist-Criollo Act, which is a California state law, says that, roughly, that if you know the exact location of an active fault, which means it is moved, it's ruptured in approximately the last 10, 11,000 years, then you can build within, up to 50 feet from it. Not
50 feet.
Not closer, but if you don't, if you're within the fault zone and you don't know exactly where the fault is, then you have to stay 100 feet back from each side.
I see. Thank you.
And the one thing I should remind people is that these faults, like you see, this is a map of the San Andreas Fault cutting through the region here. It's not like the fault is not just one point or one line. It's actually a zone. And so you should think about the zone, and you want to build, like farther away from the zone and not necessarily where you think the fault is, because it's not just one point, it is a whole region.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And here in Portola Valley, we have numerous faults, not just the San Andreas. The San Andreas is the only one under the Office Piolo Act that requires these particular setbacks, but we have so many others that are
They're like reverse and thrust faults, right?
mainly thrust faults, yes. Need a microphone.
I have a geologic question, which is not my field. But from your description, it appears that we're in a much more volatile situation in Portola Valley, say, than the San Gregorio fault. And yet the drama on the San Gregorio fault with the Mavericks and Big Sur and all the rest of it, Año Nuevo, is much more obvious to us. Is that because it's not a slip fault? It's not got sticking? I mean, if we have 10 times the power being developed by the slip fault, right? That they do, and yet it's pretty peaceful around here. It doesn't, there's no crashing waves.
Yeah, oh, well, I mean, it's just so at San Gregorio, there's different hazards. So there's a lot of landsliding and ground movement that we have here too, but it's just not as well known. There's just a lot, they're just right next to the ocean, and the community is dealing with landsliding and fault activity. At that the landsliding is just occurring at a much faster rate. And so, but I mean, we have the same problems here. There's a reason why, like, a lot of the homes in Madeira, for example, need to like be retrofitted often. Like that community is built on top of a landslide, but so it's just not as well vocalized.
Right.
Yeah.
The reason I'm bringing it up, I suppose, is that the point is that all that power is being spread out over in our entire zone. And 10 times the power that they're experiencing on the coast. And should this entire zone be therefore protected? That's, I guess,
I think the way to think about it is that we already have homes here and buildings, and we're not going to just remove everything. The idea is like we want homeowners to just be prepared for a big earthquake. It's not that so if you're going to live along active faults like most of us in California do, rather have a safety kit. Make sure you have enough water to drink and bathe and clean for a good 5 days. Make sure you have food that you can cook easily if the power goes down and there's no cell phone coverage and the roads are backed. Just prepare for it, And so if you're prepared for it, it's not going to be that bad. We're not, and if we build structures that we know can withstand a magnitude 7.8, that's what we should do, right? Like, just be prepared so that when the disaster hits, it won't become a catastrophe. Is how I would think about, you know, the best the community can do for themselves and each other.
Thank you. Could I invite Kirsten Kingdon to ask her question, please?
Yes, I am definitely not a geologist. I live at the Sequoias, which is right next to the San Andreas Fault and Saucil Pond. And so I have a very basic question. Do you have any kind of estimate as to what the likelihood is of an earthquake and how major or minor it might be? Of course, I'm especially concerned about my lifespan, but you know, say for the next 30 years.
Yeah, so the San Andreas Fault that cuts through here, we do have paleoseismic evidence. Paleoseismic evidence gives you the ages of earthquakes, dates of earthquakes. And we know, for example, that the 1906 earthquake occurred and cut across through Portola Valley. And so, and the recurrence interval is, is a function of the slip rate, which is now slightly higher. But the last earthquake occurred, you know, in 1906. So it's been how many years now since?
120.
And it's been 120 years. And so if the slip rate is, say, 25 millimeters a year at 120 years, we can just do the math and say, if there was an earthquake tomorrow, how many meters would be displaced, right? And so if we do that math, it's about 3 meters. And so then we can so there's some back calculations that we can do. But the idea would be that the Sequoias should have been built to withstand a certain amount of shaking. Hopefully there is some type of plan to evacuate all the residents in the buildings if there was an earthquake. And so if there isn't an evacuation plan, or if there isn't you're not practicing what to do when a big earthquake were to occur, I would suggest that's what you should be worried about. Because we should be able to all survive a big earthquake. It's just like how we're going to react from that disaster once it hits, because it will hit. It did. We think about, we haven't had an earthquake on the San Andreas. We've had the 1906 earthquake and we had the 1989 earthquake. So we do have earthquakes. We just don't remember them because humans, that's why we're resilient when these catastrophes happen, is that our brain, the evolution of our brain forces us to forget about it. And so it's one of those things, it's like we don't think it's ever going to happen until it happens. But when it does happen, we forget, but then we just have to be prepared.
Oh, we don't forget. And I am a safety marshal. We are doing everything we can to be prepared. But you know, I gather that you don't really have any way of estimating when the next one is going to hit.
Yeah, we have a time frame, but we don't ever, as earthquake geologists, ever predict earthquakes. We can forecast them, but we never predict them.
While we
The weather.
invite our next questioner back to the microphone, I'll just mention that the California earthquake rupture forecast suggests there will be a magnitude 6.7 or greater with a 2/3 chance in the next 30 years. So in your remaining lifetime, Kirsten, 2/3 chance of a magnitude 6.7 in the Bay Area.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think for the 1906 earthquake, there wasn't as much solar. And solar is batteries, and batteries burn, and firemen can't put out the batteries. So this is my concern. I have a huge solar thing across from my house. And I was hiking Sequoia Canyon with a firefighter, and I said, what are we going to do about all the solar that's going to keep burning? And he said, you have to find the turnoff, the electrical turnoff. So how do I, if my neighbors are gone, how do I go turn off their solar? So this is something that wasn't available in 1906, and now we have to think about it. So any comments on that?
That's a really good question and point. Yeah, so I think most people know that the earthquake and its rupture was not what caused the catastrophe from the 1906 earthquake. It was the occurrence of fires that occurred after the earthquake that burned San Francisco down. And so, yeah, and so in California, we've taken steps to prevent this from happening with PG&E. There's the idea is that once there's an earthquake, PG&E or power companies are notified, and all of the gas that is flowing through the pipelines are shut off. The BART, public transportation, stops. Like, so there are steps to preventing a disaster from becoming a catastrophe if an earthquake were to occur here. But the solar, like those are individual homes, and you can't turn that off. So that would be something to think about, and to, yeah, I don't know how you would do that.
I think one should distinguish between solar generation, which does not use lithium batteries, and batteries or power walls that do. And so if it's only a solar array that is continuously generating and exporting back to the grid, that's no particular fire hazard. Any installed battery wall is required to have prominent signage telling the firefighters where to turn it off. And every homeowner should be aware of that, just as every homeowner should be aware of how to turn off, for example, their propane gas supply or their master gas shutoff valve. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to chat to neighbors and spread through our Firewise or similar groups in Portola Valley the knowledge of what individuals should need to do and how they may wish to liaise with their neighbors.
So, Christy, it's a really good question. I think that, at least for now, until we have better technology there, the best solution may be the fire district's suggestion of forming cohesive neighborhood groups. And so you have neighbor checking on neighbor, taking care of neighbor. And so small groups could know where the solar installations are, know how to shut off things, know how to do the gas shutoffs. That's the other thing.
I'm interested in Portola Valley. We have multiple faults besides the San Andreas. And there's evidence that some of them moved in 1906. So it seems to me that the slightly lower slip rate on the San Andreas fault itself might be accommodated, or if that's the right word, because of post-seismic slip on other faults during the major earthquakes.
Yes, that can happen. Yeah. But we don't, the faults that are subparallel to the San Andreas here will be part of the San Andreas. So there's other strands to the east, like the Hayward fault and the Calaveras fault.
Well, I was just thinking specifically of faults that we know of in Portola Valley itself.
Okay.
So, yes, if there's X number of feet in the town, but in Woodside, there's more movement like there was in 1906. That could be perhaps because these other faults were moving, and the Lawson report does show that they did move.
Yeah, yeah. So if they're subparallel strands of the San Andreas, that 25 millimeters a year is for this section. So any subparallel strand of the San Andreas through here would be part of that.
So to clarify, Kim, kinematically, each side of the San Andreas fault zone, and by that I mean the local Rift Valley, 2 or 3 multiple strands, kinematically along the length of the San Andreas fault, from the South Bay to the North Bay, we should expect a uniform motion, average motion per year. So do you see any way around a 25 millimeter per year slip in Woodside Portola Valley?
I do not think so, but
And
that,
so then the follow-up would be, from which trenches do the existing lower slip rates come in the peninsula segment? And does this mean will you be seeking out trenching possibilities along parallel branches, as Bob mentioned, that might have lower motions, but the extra missing 8 millimeters a year?
so with the trenches, like work in the trenches gives us the ages of previous earthquakes and not necessarily slip rate unless there's an offset landform that we can connect across there. I think more work should be done along the peninsula section of the San Andreas. It is just very hard because a lot of the area is developed. And so you have for me to go in, for example, and to do a good job mapping the fault strands through here, which I'd love to do because, you know, in my own backyard, I have to walk through private property. And to walk through private property, it takes a lot of time and effort, and nobody wants me around to tell them that there's a fault that I'm trying to map that cuts through their property. And so it's not easy. Like, and Sanborn, it was doable because I was at a county park and I was able to freely walk the faults through the county park. To do that right, I have to, you know, just imagine me just walking, right? I'm just walking back and forth, trying to figure out what these landforms look like and how they may have gotten there. And so I would love to if I had free range.
Kim, presumably you begin by using LiDAR imagery to identify the most plausible target places to study.
Yes.
And I think this committee would welcome the chance to help you gain access if you found specific sites you thought were worthy of investigation.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be fantastic.
That is, you have to reach a certain level of stress before strain happens. So that we're looking at the aggregate of all the faults in the system. And unless there's large amounts of constraining or releasing bends where stuff's going up or going down, you're not accumulating, you're making, basically the whole thing is moving as a package over the course of time. And so you may have to amortize over 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 or 1,000,000 years. But in the different slip rates and in aggregate, all have to relate to what's finally happening.
Yeah, so the idea is that we have a strain budget across the region from the Pacific Ocean all the way out to say the Colorado Plateau. And so we know that the overall strain budget, and so that's present day strain. But what the challenge is that the geodetic data covers a broad region. And so what we do is that for us to assess hazard, we have to know the slip rate on individual faults. So the geodesy, what we call the geodesy, tells us what's going on in a broad region. And then we have to kind of break that region into blocks that slide along these faults. And so it's basically coming up with a model. So basically this picture that, this map that I'm showing here, the strain budget across this area is like, say, 40 millimeters a year, 35, 40 millimeters a year. But that's what we know for sure. And so that strain should be represented in earthquakes, and that's basically strain release. Okay. And so that strain release is then partitioned across all of these faults. And the challenge for most earthquake studies is that we don't know where all these fault strands are, and we don't know how fast they're moving. And to get ages and slip rates along all of the fault strands is challenging because of access and because of erosion. There's just many different challenges. So what we do know is we have at Sanborn, we have one location where or up on the North Coast section, we have one. So we take that data to come up with models to see how everything slips on the individual faults. If that makes sense, Gary.
Well, in the last analysis, Don Anderson, who was director of the seismic lab 30 years ago, said, people ask me, when is the next fault coming? Can you tell? He said, we don't know exactly, but every day it passes, brings it one day closer. And he says, people say, oh, really? Well, yeah, it's inevitable.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
gonna
Yeah.
happen.
But I think we have the infrastructure and ways to be safe when an earthquake occurs. We
That's
just
the most important.
that's the most
thing.
important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can we survive?
Yeah.
I've got to go, folks, but I'm really glad to have heard this talk. You got us all thinking about it, and it is a complicated problem, but one we have to live with. But you could die of boredom in Nebraska. We've got the best place in the world to live.
We do. We do.
Gotta live.
Well, this is a less practical question, and thank you for the great talk. How far back in time do you think you can go with a combination of geomorphology and cosmogenic isotope? Are there favorable conditions when you go back hundreds of
Go
thousands
back
of years?
years. Yeah. Depends on the landscape and the environment, but basically it's what the controlling factor is the amount of erosion that's removing the
Yeah.
land form rather than, but so in deserts, we can go back, tens to hundreds of thousands.
Because the half-life is very long, so that's not a
Yeah,
concern.
so the half-life is so what I'm measuring is a production of beryllium-10, and every isotope has a decay, and that decay is very long. So over the time scale that I'm looking at, it's not important what that decay is. Good question. Good questions.
I don't see any more questions, and we're past our due date, if you will. So want to thank you so much, Kim. This was incredibly interesting and informative and frightening talk. Yeah, you've just increased our seismic hazard here. About what, 50%?
I appreciate it. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay,
Kim.
And
And thank you to all the online audience. We're very glad that community members are joining in to listen and understand more about the hazards.
so thank you, everyone, and we'll see
Do you need a motion to adjourn the committee meeting?
do you
I move we adjourn this committee meeting.
second? Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The meeting is adjourned, and thank you, online audience, for joining us.